Hi everyone, Mr. H here. This is part 2 of chapter 2.1, Functions and Evolution of Human Resources Management. In our previous video, we explored the basics of human resources management, the concepts, what human resources planning is, a little bit about labor turnover, and we also explored the factors, external and internal, that influence the human resources plan. So in this video, we will look at the human resources plan and all the strategies involved in planning human resources. So the human resources or the HR or workforce plan usually considers 4 specific aspects. It considers recruitment, decisions on how you're going to hire and recruit your employees, training, decisions on how you're going to train or keep your employees properly trained, termination or dismissal, decisions on how you're going to terminate contract or what specific steps are followed to fire people, and also appraisal, which is all the steps, all the strategies to evaluate your employees' performance. Let's start with the first. When we think about recruitment, the very first idea we have to consider is that recruitment can go in 2 possible directions. It can be internal recruitment, which is instead of hiring someone from the outside, you actually promote a worker, an actual employee that you already have, to the new position. Okay, so this is actually very motivational. It's actually very important for a business to consider the people that they already have to fill one specific position that is available instead of immediately looking outside. It is actually very motivational for all the other workers to see that they have a chance for progression and for better positions as they go in experience. So this is very important to do. So this is the first look. The other position or the other direction that we already know is obviously external. In this case, the business looks for the new employee from the outside labor market, from the labor pool. In the outside, so they, put some ads on websites or newspapers, and then interview people, evaluate people, and then they hire their best choice. This is usually done. This is best done when you actually do not have anyone inside your business that has the training, the skills, the competencies, or the experience that you do need for that specific job position. When there's no one that is able to fill that position, well, the best move then would be external recruitment. Now, for recruitment, we follow a number of steps. Number 1, we first identify the job position. We identify there's a need for an employee in that specific area. So we come up with a job description, exactly what the job is about, and a person specification, what specific qualifications you need for the person to have in order to fill that job description and job position properly. So we need these 2 aspects, the job description and the person specification. Then we do the application step, which is deciding how to find the best candidate. Usually it could be an application form, okay, or you can actually ask them to bring a CV or a resume. So these are the most common steps. Usually some businesses take one or the other, or sometimes they even take the 2. They have them fill out an application form and bring a CV, or just the CV, or just the application form. Businesses decide what's the best step for them. Then is the selection process, which is the final process before hiring someone, which follows a number of things. Most of these selection processes include testing the aptitude, that if the person has the skills, the proper qualifications, not just on paper, but the actual abilities for the business, for the position. Psychometric, which is a testing for their psychological aspects of the person, and also we also sometimes have this team-based testing, which is one that tries the teamwork skills. Okay, the skills of the candidate to work in teams properly or effectively. Then there's usually an interview, which can be face-to-face, a personal interview, a panel interview when you're in front of a number of different authorities, or you can have video conference if you are in a different city or country. It can be a multi-stage interview, which is like sometimes you have one interview today with one person, and then you might have another interview a week or two later with another manager, and then another later. So you can have different steps, or it can even be multi-day. You can do one thing today, for example, the aptitude testing, the next day the psychometric testing, the next day the interview, and so on. So selection can take different number of steps depending on the requirements or the expectations of the business. And these are the 3 steps for recruitment. Now, talking about training. Once you have hired your workers, some specific training might be required at different levels or according to different circumstances. So, for example, for new employees, there could be an induction, a number of hours or even days where you spend with your workers, teaching them the basics of the business. It can be on the job. Some training can be on the job, which means there can be someone assigned to the new one as a mentor who would be from time to time asking what's going on in terms of the performance and on how well he follows the rules. It can be also shadowing, which is like someone who would be next to you at all times, checking that you're doing it right as a new employee. There can be also off-the-job training, which is something that might happen out of working hours, maybe on a Saturday or later in the day, maybe a workshop, a conference, or you can even get a course to get proper training. And this, again, as I said, would not just happen when you're a new employee. Training can happen from time to time when the business wants to add or provide more skills or better abilities to their workers. Training can also be cognitive. We can consider cognitive training when we're talking about giving to the employees specific thinking or processing skills for the job. Or it can be behavioral training, which is thinking about training their interpersonal or intrapersonal skills, their abilities to work in teams, to relate with each other, to have proper working relations as they work together in teams. Now, talking about appraisal. Appraisal is evaluating. So every once in a while, a business has to stop, well, not stop working, but stop in their everyday working just for a moment to evaluate what each employee is doing and how well they are doing. So for appraisal, we can have some formative evaluations that usually happen every year, every 2 years, or every 3 years, and where you get a feedback of your performance. Some of these evaluations can actually also be summative, which must be based in a document that it will be shared with every worker with a number of standards or benchmarks or specific expectations that is set for every worker. So at the end of the cycle or at the end of the year or the specific period, the supervisor or the boss will meet the workers and check how well they did on each of these standards. It can be also a 360-degree meeting where both manager and workers, or co-workers, or manager and subordinates, or even managers or design clients would be together to discuss together the performance and to agree on a specific goals depending on their performance. This is a very positive thing as long as everybody is respectful and everybody is being honest to what they're saying, and because everybody in the meeting would benefit from hearing the other's positions, and this is actually very beneficial for any business wanting to do proper planning and proper evaluation of their own performance. So 360 degrees are actually quite good. There can also be spaces for self-appraisal. Usually a summative test or evaluation would also be followed by a self-appraisal where each employee would have to make a proper reflection of how well or wrong they did, and they would make suggestions, and each would commit to new goals for the following cycle, the following period, or the following year. Okay, so these are for types of appraisal or types of evaluation or ways to evaluate the employee's performance in a business. Finally, termination or dismissal. Termination or dismissal can happen in three possible ways. One way to dismiss or say bye to a worker is just because of termination, when the employee leaves at the end of the contract. I mean, usually contracts take 1 year or 2 years, so once the contract is done, if there is no more need of the worker, we just tell the worker that we're not renewing contract, or the worker himself, herself can decide not to continue. So the contract is done, they can actually free to go, unless they obviously sign again for a new contract for the following year or period. Dismissal. Dismissal is when the employee is fired, and this is the properly word here being used, he is fired, for breaking the terms of the contract or harming the image of the business because they did something very wrong that affected the business, and then the person must be fired or dismissed. Is the formal expression for it. And finally, we have redundancy. Redundancy happens when there are specific structural or economical financial changes in the business, or just because the project ends and we don't have that position available anymore. So when one position is not available anymore, we don't need that position anymore, or we don't need that specific number of workers anymore. It could be for, economical situations, closing one specific project, or the end of a specific project. Then we go to redundancy. Redundancy is when there's no work for the employee. It can be voluntary. Okay, so it's after a conversation with the employee and they just accept redundancy and go. It can be involuntary. They just get a letter and they are sent home because, well, there's no more need of that position, or the project is closing, or the business is just closing. So then redundancy happens. Usually there is a redundancy payment, so a specific amount of money being given to those employees, so they just do not leave empty-handed from the business, but they would, this is actually something very important that happens, so the employees can actually leave the business with something in their hands to continue with their lives and find a new job, since this is usually an unexpected situation most of the time. So there they are. Termination, contract done. Dismissal, you did something wrong. Redundancy, there's no more job available in that business. So these are the 4 aspects of the human resources plan. This is actually a very short summary of everything that must be considered in terms of recruitment. Remember, those are the steps. In terms of training, these are the first 3 are the possible ways they happen. This is the 4 and 5 is other possible ways to look at them or consider them. Then you have 4 specific types of evaluation or appraisal, and finally the 3 possible ways of termination or dismissal of your employees. And this is it for the human resources plan, and also that's it for chapter 2.1. Bye bye.